Today I want to talk a little bit about my food journey. So I always get asked, how did I become a vegetarian? And when I say vegetarian, I mean, I just eat vegetables. Don't eat any animal products or flesh or anything like that, with the exception of honey. There's a farmer who's locally here in Texas who I order honey from. I met him at a festival and order honey from him and bee pollen, and sometimes ghee, just for the nutritional benefits, and also get that from a good source also. But other than that, it's all vegetarian, mostly raw for the most part. Occasionally I'll do some cooked hummus, but mostly sprouted and maybe blanch it or just do it raw altogether. But very, very lightly cooked, like below. I actually have a thermometer and I measure it below 118 degrees Fahrenheit to make sure I'm not, losing all of the enzymes that would help me, digest that food and convert it to energy. So, how did I become a vegetarian? So originally, it started for I guess animal rights reasons or environmental reasons. My wife and I watched a documentary, and it got us, and we was motivated to go ahead and make the change. And turns out my appetite was still a whole lot bigger than my heart. So it only lasted a few weeks. But looking back, though, we kind of set ourselves up for failure, which turned out to be a great learning opportunity. Because the first thing we did was we looked up all of our comfort foods that didn't have animal products in them. So stuff like the Oreos, different types of candy. I want to say Twizzlers or something like that. I forget. But we looked up all of our comfort foods that didn't have animal products in them, and we loaded up. And then back then too, like vegan food, of course still processed like now. You can get a lot of the processed food, but back then, it was horrible. Like it resembled nothing like anything you would call edible. Like it tasted horrible. So we really didn't know what to eat, and it only lasted a few weeks. And then, we were kind of right back into our old patterns. So I like to say my appetite was still a whole lot bigger than my heart at the time. So a couple years later, I ended up developing some gastrointestinal issues. Could have been ulcers, could have been leaky gut, not 100% sure, but I went to go visit a gastro, and we had determined that what I ate would either stimulate the symptoms or relieve the symptoms. So the doctor recommended that I do a fiber supplement for 2 to 3 weeks, and then go back to visit him, and we go from there. If the fiber supplement didn't help based on what we discovered in terms of food being the stimuli, then we would go other routes. So I went to the grocery store. I grabbed the supplement that he recommended. I'm reading the back of it to see what was in it. I knew what fiber was, but I guess I really didn't, because I didn't connect the dots as to what it really was. And so I'm reading the back of the box, and it's all vegetables. It's vegetables that have been, I guess, dehydrated and grinded into a powder. So my wheels started turning. My spidey senses were going off, so to speak. And so I went out into the car, did some research, like, hey, if fiber is in the supplement, then maybe I could just kind of eat some vegetables and that'll do it, as opposed to taking a supplement. Because I was already a little nervous due to symptoms I was having already, and food had already showed that it could relieve the symptoms. But now I'm actually learning like what to eat, right? And so I went out into the car, did some research, found another doctor who specialized in gut health as well. I forget exactly where her practice was, but on her website, she told that she would recommend her patients going raw for a few weeks before she introduced any medicine, unless it was just super severe, because she wanted to see how their body recovered on its own if given the right conditions to heal. Was it capable? Was it strong enough to do it on its own, or did they need additional intervention? And so on her website, she actually had recipes and kind of ways to get started. And and it was super helpful, super game changer for me. You never really understand, you never really know how far reaching your good deeds can go. So that's a lesson for me and for all of us, to never hold back. We got something good to offer. We share it, even if it's not popular at the moment. Sometimes it takes time for things to catch up, and that's okay. And that doesn't mean that doesn't belittle anybody that's not there. Just somebody has to go first. And if you're in that situation, you try to embrace it. And so I'm so grateful for that doctor, for that lady who did that, because at the time it wasn't as much information about gut health as there is now. So I was so fortunate to just stumble across her, and I went back into the grocery store and I started buying the things that was on her list, and her recipes, and looking at the pictures, and identifying what was what, and buying them and putting the dishes together. And this was a great motivator, because I was the only one in my family, in my household, eating like this. So everybody would be eating ribs and drenched in sauce, and I would be eating this raw dish, or just very lightly steamed dish, and bland, not much flavor. But it was really reintroducing me to the flavors that the food actually has when you're not suppressing it with a lot of other stuff. And I like adding flavors too, but the food itself, has its own texture and flavors that we miss altogether when we overcook food or overseason food. So I'm being introduced to all of these things, in front of my family, just kind of toughing through it on my own. But over time, week 1, week 2, week 3, I started to recognize some of the changes in my health. I mentioned before how food would either stimulate or stimulate the healing, or stimulate the symptoms. So I started to recognize that the symptoms were going away, and I ended up not needing any further intervention from the from the GI. So for a year, I would go back and forth, trying to hang on to the way I was eating before and what was actually starting to work for me now. And mind you, all along, I've been meditating and doing breath exercises, and my wife had actually introduced me to Qigong, and I ended up liking it, and she ended up not liking it. And so all of these things kind of, they became a regular part of my practice, my daily routine for the most part. And a lot of these things were things that helped me recover from PTSD and alcoholism. So I already knew they worked, but there was still a bit of a disconnect between me doing those practices every day and my diet intake. So, I'm going back and forth between, what I wanted to do, if I wanted to fully commit to the shift or not. But my body's telling me, hey, it's time to commit. It's time to make the shift. And, I started to notice some unintended side effects, some good consequences to my diet change. My mood started to change. Things that, energetic blockages that I had before, and like, what does that mean? Like, thoughts that I couldn't get past before, incidents that have happened with people, or me feeling victimized. all of a sudden I'm able to process these things better and literally, put them behind me. Like I can refer back to them as a learning experience, but they're not like they weren't pinning me down the way they were in the past or at all. And then also in a more physical sense with some of the foods, the cravings, uh, those were gone. And that was the same thing I noticed with PTSD and alcoholism. Like the cravings, the food, they left. And I know a huge part of that was attributed to the meditation practices that I was doing and breath practices that I was doing, as well as, my dedication and my consistency to doing these things day in and day out. But now I'm seeing they moved me to another point where I was ready to get even lighter, right, energetically, and the foods that I was eating before wasn't supporting the flow in my body that I created. So it was time for me to go to the next step. Um, and so I noticed those mood changes, me being able to process things better, me not being stimulated as much by uh, by external stimuli, whether it be people, whether it be entertainment. In fact, a lot of those things started to become overstimulating, and I needed more space from a lot of those things, the cleaner my diet got. Um, and now that there's a whole lot of information on gut health, or while I was going through this process, I started to notice a whole lot of emphasis on the gut microbiome. And like most people, had no idea what that was, but I started to notice that one of the side effects of a healthy gut is a healthy mood. One of the side effects of a healthy gut is a good mood, I should say. Um, and so, I'm putting two and two together, just kind of learning experientially on my own, just being my own test subject. And really cool thing happened throughout the process. My wife started to notice the changes, and she got on board, and she wanted to do it. And other members of my family, they're not vegetarian, but they changed they changed the amount of meat and processed foods they consumed altogether, to a point where maybe they're only eating salmon but incorporating way more vegetables, eating a lot more fruit in their diets. And so it definitely had an effect. But I can say though, initially it was very awkward, right? They're subconsciously, meaning in our bodies, we know when we're being unhealthy. We know when we shouldn't be eating certain things. We know certain things are just bad for us to begin with, let alone if you've been to a doctor and you got high cholesterol or something like that. And so I would sit at the table with folks, and I would have my meal, and they would be eating their meal. And by this time, like, the cravings were gone. Like I wasn't concerned about what they were eating. I wasn't missing it. I had already worked through the blockages, the emotions. I was good. And now all of a sudden, like, I started to recognize tension from, or guilt or resentment from whomever I was sitting at the table with. They were looking at their plate differently. And I sympathize, because it does take discipline, and it does take courage to make those shifts. And you do have to be in a certain state. I don't know that for most people you could just say, I'm gonna change my diet today. Some people can, but you need some type of like jump starter. And for a lot of people, it's a health scare. And that tends to like break the chain and allow them enough space to actually move in a different direction. But when there's nothing to motivate you, or if there's nothing to break that cycle, then while you're trying to make the change, you still have you still know you can go back to your comforts, and you'll be okay. And for me, I couldn't go back to my comforts. I wasn't going to be okay. Energy drinks wasn't going to cut it. Smoking meat wasn't going to cut it. And all the things I was doing, it just wasn't going to cut it anymore. So I knew I had to just go in a totally different direction. and it ended up working out, in my benefit. I'm glad I listened to my body. I'm glad I made the shifts. It's been 6, 7 years, probably going on 8 years now. I don't know. I kind of forgot count, lost count. Um, but I'm still learning. And I've been fortunate enough to have a community of people who are all working on these issues, working the medical fields and helping people repopulate their gut microbiome with healthy microbes and leading healthy lives. So I'm super happy, super fortunate to be in the situation that I'm in. And I hope this message reach whoever it needs to reach at the right time. And if it's not the right time for somebody, this message will be there for you in the future. I hope you have a wonderful day, and try and get outside. It's not a sunny day today. It's cloudy, but that doesn't mean you can't shine. So get outside and shine. You be the light. Get outside and shine, and your cells respond differently outside. They regenerate differently outside. Your lungs, they breathe differently outside. You heal better outside. You get more energized outside. So try and get outside, get you some fresh air, get you some sunlight, and enjoy your day.